Emily Foster was a devoted young mother, beloved preschool teacher, and creature of routine till one ordinary morning ended in her brutal murder. Chris Barlow, her ex-fiancé with a dark past, had vanished from her life years earlier. When Emily's body was found and her Fitbit told a story no one expected, investigators uncovered a chilling truth. Technology didn't just track her steps, tracked her killer. It was an ordinary Monday morning in the quiet suburb of Maple Hill, Michigan. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft glow across the tree-lined streets. Emily Foster, a 32-year-old preschool teacher and single mother, was already up and dressed in her usual running gear. She was a creature of habit every morning, rain or shine. She jogged through her neighborhood after dropping off her 6-year-old son, Lucas, at school. Emily had worked hard to build a stable life after her divorce. She was well liked by her colleagues, adored by the parents of the children she taught, and known for being warm, reliable, and kind. Her life was simple, quiet, and free of drama. That's why what happened next left the entire community in disbelief. At around 8:15 a.m., Emily dropped Lucas off at Maple Hill Elementary. Security footage showed her smiling and waving to her son as he ran inside. She then returned home, likely planning to shower, have breakfast, and get ready for work. But sometime between 9 o'clock and 11 a.m., something went horribly wrong. At 10:43 a.m., Emily's neighbor, Mrs. Keller, noticed something strange. While walking her dog, she saw that Emily's front door was slightly ajar. That was unusual. Emily was cautious. She always locked her door even if she was just stepping out for a moment. Curious and slightly concerned, Mrs. Keller called out Emily's name but got no response. She knocked. But still nothing. Trusting her instincts, she dialed 911. When officers arrived minutes later, they entered the house and were met with a gruesome scene. Emily was lying face down in her living room, her body surrounded by blood. The injuries were severe bruising to her face and torso, consistent with being struck multiple times. There were no visible weapons. The attack had been brutal and personal. It looked like someone had unleashed rage on her. Detectives began examining the house for signs of a break-in, but nothing had been forced. The back door was unlocked, but there was no broken glass or signs of struggle outside. Inside, the furniture was untouched. Nothing was stolen, and her purse and wallet were found on the kitchen counter. Only her phone was missing. Puzzled investigators. Why take only the phone? As they surveyed the room, one small detail stood out: Emily's Fitbit. She wore it every day, mostly to track her morning jogs and sleep patterns. It was still strapped to her wrist, and investigators hoped it might hold some useful data. Forensics arrived soon after, documenting the scene while investigators began knocking on neighbors' doors for any leads. The news of Emily's death spread quickly. Parents at the preschool were shocked. Teachers cried as they heard the news. Lucas's father, now living in another state, was notified and rushed back to Maple Hill. Everyone kept asking the same question: who would want to hurt Emily? With no forced entry, no theft, and no known enemies, the case was already becoming one of the most puzzling crimes the town had ever seen. But the answer would come from the unlikeliest place: her wrist. The investigation into Emily Foster's death took a surprising turn when detectives decided to analyze the data from her Fitbit. Initially considered just a minor detail, the fitness tracker quickly became the most important piece of evidence. Since it was still securely fastened to her wrist when police found her body, there was hope that the device had recorded anything that could help piece together the timeline of her final moments. Fitbits and other smart devices do more than count steps. They log heart rate, sleep cycles, movement, and even location when synced with a phone. The model Emily wore had a heart rate monitor, step tracker, and Bluetooth capabilities. Detectives obtained a warrant and pulled data from the Fitbit's companion app on her home computer. What they found was chilling. On the morning of her death, Emily's heart rate was steady during her jog around 8:30 a.m. after she returned home and settled in. Everything appeared normal until 10:27 a.m. at that exact time. The device recorded a sharp spike in her heart rate, It jumped more than 60 beats per minute in under a minute. Less than 2 minutes later, at 10:29 a.m., the heart rate reading suddenly dropped to 0. Emily had died. But it was what happened after 10:29 that sent a wave of discomfort through the investigation team. According to the Fitbit, the device continued to log steps, 47 of them after her heart had stopped. That suggested someone else, possibly the killer, had picked up her wrist, dragged or moved her body, or tried to remove the device and stopped short. Proved the scene hadn't gone still immediately after the attack. Someone had been in that house long enough to touch her body. Adding to the suspicion was the fact that Emily's phone was gone, yet her Fitbit remained. The phone had likely been taken to delete messages, destroy digital traces, or prevent location data from being accessed. It hinted that the killer might have known just enough about technology to try and cover their tracks, but not enough to realize the Fitbit was just as revealing. The team began using the time markers from the Fitbit to reconstruct a precise timeline. If the attack occurred at 10:27 and ended by 10:29, then whoever killed Emily had under 15 minutes before Mrs. Keller called 911. That left a narrow window, suggesting the killer hadn't been a stranger scrambling in panic. This was someone who had planned their escape. Detectives dug deeper into Emily's online accounts. They searched for synced Bluetooth devices, message logs, anything connected to that morning. While her phone couldn't be immediately traced, they discovered something else. The Fitbit had briefly reconnected to her phone via Bluetooth around 1:29 a.m., 20 minutes after she had died. That detail changed everything. It confirmed that the killer didn't just attack Emily and flee. They lingered. They accessed her phone, possibly tried to erase data, and in doing so, allowed the Fitbit to link back to the device. That automatic connection was recorded in the app's logs. Suddenly, a silent witness had spoken. The device on Emily's wrist had not only documented her last moments, but it also recorded the presence of another person in her home after she died. In a case with no obvious suspects and no surveillance inside the house, this digital footprint became a crucial thread for investigators to follow. The next step was figuring out who had reason to be there and why they stayed after the crime. As detectives expanded their search for suspects, they began to focus on Emily's past. Since there were no signs of forced entry and little indication of a robbery, the attack felt personal. That meant someone Emily knew and possibly trusted likely been involved. Investigators started reviewing names from her phone contacts, social media, and interviews with friends and family. One name kept surfacing: Chris Barlow. Chris was Emily's ex-fiancé. They had been engaged 3 years earlier, but the relationship ended suddenly and without much explanation. Emily had told close friends that things with Chris had become too intense. Though she never accused him of violence, she hinted at controlling behavior. According to those close to her, Chris didn't take the breakup well. He moved to another city afterward, and Emily had not mentioned him since. She had even gone so far as to block his number and social media accounts. As far as anyone knew, he was gone. But when police tried to track Chris down for questioning, they hit a wall. He wasn't at the last known address listed on his driver's license. His social media accounts hadn't been updated in over a year. The number he used to have was no longer in service. Chris Barlow had vanished. That disappearance raised red flags. Detectives began to wonder if he had resurfaced recently, quietly, carefully, and with a plan. A friend of Emily's, Megan, provided a chilling detail during an interview. Just a few weeks before the murder, Emily had mentioned that she felt like someone was following her during her morning jogs. She said she kept hearing footsteps behind her or seeing the same car parked on different streets. Thought it was just paranoia or nerves, so she didn't report it. But now, in the context of her murder, that detail became deeply suspicious. With Emily's Fitbit timeline in hand, investigators reviewed nearby traffic cameras, hoping to spot any unfamiliar vehicles entering her neighborhood that morning. One camera, positioned at a major intersection near her street, showed a white pickup truck turning into her block at 10:15 a.m., just 12 minutes before her heart rate spiked and the attack occurred. The image was blurry, but the truck matched the description of the one Chris Barlow used to drive. Records showed that Chris had sold the vehicle over a year ago, or so it seemed. When detectives tracked down the new owner listed on the vehicle registration, they discovered the name was fake. The address led to an abandoned building, and the phone number went straight to voicemail. The truck had never really been sold. Chris had simply changed the paperwork to make himself harder to trace. Now the case took a darker turn. Chris had clearly gone to great lengths to disappear from Emily's life and reappear without warning. If he had been following her, learning her schedule, and waiting for a time when Lucas would be at school, the attack might not have been spontaneous at all. It could have been planned. The discovery of the white truck and the fake ownership records added weight to the theory that Chris had returned with intent. The question was, where was he now, and how far would he go to stay hidden? Detectives now had a strong suspicion that Chris Barlow was behind Emily Foster's murder, but suspicion wasn't enough. They needed hard evidence, something undeniable to tie him to the crime scene. With the discovery of the white pickup truck on traffic cameras, investigators began searching for storage facilities, parking lots, and secluded areas where someone might stash a vehicle unnoticed. After checking multiple locations across town, one storage facility just outside Maple Hill caught their attention. A white pickup matching the truck from the footage was found parked inside a locked unit rented under a different name. The unit had been rented in cash a month before the murder. A closer look at the vehicle revealed small but significant traces of evidence. Were faint smudges of what appeared to be blood in the truck bed. Forensics confirmed the blood matched Emily Foster's DNA. That was the break detectives needed. Inside the truck, they found a torn plastic glove, a partially burned receipt, and a phone SIM card hidden beneath the lining of the glove compartment. That SIM card, when tested, matched Emily's missing phone. Although the phone itself hadn't been recovered, the SIM card's data was intact. Investigators now had physical evidence placing Chris in possession of Emily's property after her death. Next, detectives pulled surveillance footage from nearby gas stations and convenience stores. At a station 3 miles from the storage facility, footage showed a man arriving in the same white pickup, kept his head down, wore a hooded sweatshirt, sunglasses, and a face mask. Still, there was enough visible his build, the way he walked, and even a small tattoo on his wrist that matched an old photo of Chris Barlow to strongly suggest it was him. More revealing than the footage was the time stamp. The man purchased fuel at 11:12 a.m., less than 45 minutes after Emily's. Fitbit had recorded the spike and flatline of her heart rate. Investigators were confident that they had found their suspect and his escape route. While combing through data from the Fitbit and the SIM card, a new connection came to light. The Fitbit had connected via Bluetooth to Emily's phone at 10:49 a.m. 2 minutes after her time of death. That connection log was stored on the Fitbit app on Emily's home computer. It proved that both devices were in close proximity after her death, confirming that someone had used her phone inside or just outside the house after killing her. That person could only have been Chris. The Bluetooth data, SIM card, truck, and surveillance footage all combined to build a strong timeline of Chris's movements. He had entered the neighborhood at 10:15 a.m., attacked Emily by 10:27 a.m., stayed in the house long enough to access her phone at 10:49 a.m., but was seen on camera at 11:12 a.m. fleeing the area. Each detail alone might not have been enough for a conviction, but together they painted a clear picture. Chris hadn't just killed Emily. He had planned it, executed it, and tried to erase every trace of himself. But what he didn't realize was that the tiny device on Emily's wrist had recorded everything, quietly logging the final moments of her life and his presence in her home. With this evidence in hand, authorities launched a nationwide search. Chris Barlow had disappeared again, but this time he left behind a trail of digital breadcrumbs he couldn't erase. 2 weeks after the discovery of the truck and the damning Fitbit and SIM card data, the manhunt for Chris Barlow intensified. Detectives worked with state and federal agencies, issuing bulletins with his last known photo and details of the vehicle he was believed to be using, but Chris had done his homework. He had changed his appearance, paid for everything in cash, and left no obvious online activity. Still, the digital trail he thought he'd erased continued to betray him. A breakthrough came when an alert motel clerk in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, recognized Chris from a flyer He had checked in under a false name and paid cash. But the clerk thought it was strange that he always kept the "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door and never allowed housekeeping inside. The clerk called the local police, who arrived within the hour. Chris was taken into custody without incident. Inside the room, police found multiple IDs, a backpack full of burner phones, a box of hair dye, and receipts that showed he had been moving from town to town since the murder. Back in Maple Hill, the news of Chris's arrest brought both relief and sorrow. Emily's friends and family gathered for a vigil in her memory. Her son Lucas was staying with his grandparents, shielded from the full horror of what had happened. Emily's loved ones now had a face to the crime, a person responsible, and a glimmer of justice in sight. The case against Chris Barlow moved swiftly. The prosecution presented a timeline so precise that it left little room for doubt. The Fitbit had recorded Emily's heart rate spiking and then flatlining. The Bluetooth log proved her phone was accessed after her death. SIM card hidden in Chris's truck showed her phone was in his possession, and the blood in the vehicle confirmed contact with her body. Surveillance footage placed him at a gas station minutes after the murder, and the storage unit he rented under a fake identity linked him directly to the white pickup used in the crime. Forensic experts explained how wearable technology could track far more than just fitness data. It could document the precise moment a life ended and even offer a clue about what happened after. In this case, the Fitbit did just that. It had become the silent witness that ultimately solved the murder. Chris Barlow showed little emotion during the trial. His defense attempted to argue that the evidence was circumstantial, but the jury didn't buy it. After only 5 hours of deliberation, Chris was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Emily Foster's story made national headlines. News outlets across the country reported how a simple fitness tracker played a key role in solving a murder. Experts called it a landmark case in the use of digital evidence. Emily had been silenced, but her story was told by the very technology she wore on her wrist. It was her routine, her habits, and her trust in a small piece of wearable tech that allowed justice to be served. Even in death, she helped catch her killer.